I'm sure you've all heard about this if you've been knocking around the world for a bit. When we talk about setting goals, we talk about SMART goals. This is where your goal is specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant or realistic. I've seen both words used, and it's has a time frame attached to it. So let's look at those goals you've just written. So, for example, if you said you wanted to finish writing a book, or you wanted to write a book in 2021, let's make it more specific. I want to complete a, for example, 50,000 word novel by June 2020. You could even make it more specific, by the end of June, or by September or August, or whatever your word length is. If you're already editing, then perhaps your goal is going to be, I want to finish my novel by writing a further 40,000 words. So how can you make this single sentence goal much more specific? I see, for example, Ava has got a very specific goal here. She wants to finish editing the novel that she was working on last year and send it to 30 plus agents within the month. I mean, that's got a lovely time frame on it, and it's got a very specific number of agents. And then she still wants to complete 2 more stories by year end, which would actually then be another goal, a separate goal. So I would prefer that you treat each of these goals as a separate item. Right. Is it measurable? Measurable, the reason I say this, and this is kind of tied into relevant and realistic, you cannot measure, I want to be a bestseller, or I want to publish a book. Well, in fact, publishing, okay, no, that doesn't work, because you can measure that, and you can certainly control it. But again, to measure it, for example, my goals are very time specific. I think I've got, as I said, about 4 writing goals for the year. And the one is to be completed, for example, by April, the one by July, the one by September, and the other one by December. So I have made them measurable. I will know whether or not I have achieved that number of words by that date. So yes, it's measurable. Is it achievable? We'll talk later on how to make a writing goal achievable, but I want you to consider, if you are a very slow writer and you haven't even started your novel, then finishing it in 3 months is only going to be possible if you are a very fast writer or you don't have a day job. Achievable is especially important in how much control do you have over this. If your goal is to have your book published by a New York Big 5 publisher by the end of the year, that's going to be a bit more difficult, because there's a lot of elements that go into publishing a book that you do not have control over. And if you do not have control over it, it should not be in your goal. These are your goals that you can control, that you are going to action this year. So if your goal is, I want to sign with an agent, or sign a contract with an agent by August, that's going to be a little bit more complicated. However, looking again at Ava's, where she says, I'm going to send to 30 plus agents within the month, that is now making a goal that is A, achievable, and B, measurable, and C, achievable, in that she can control that. How the agents respond might be out of her control, but it's giving her a pretty good shot at achieving the bigger picture, because she's obviously covering her bases and sending it out to a lot of agents. Next, is it relevant and is it realistic? The reason I say relevant is that, for example, if your overwhelming goal for the year is to be published, then is finding an agent the right way to go? Is it relevant if your goal is actually to get that book out really quickly and to strike while the iron's hot? Because finding an agent might take a lot longer than a year. Traditional publishing moves incredibly slowly. For those of you who listened into my last webinar of last year that I did for Now Novel, which should be available on the Now Novel Vimeo site, I spoke about how publishing works and the differences between traditional publishing and self-publishing, etc., etc. But there is a lot that you cannot control, and it's a very slow, glacially slow industry. So if your goal is to be published quickly, then is it realistic to approach agents? Should you not perhaps be looking at self-publishing instead? There are other ways to achieve your goal. So this is basically where you're going to now work out if the big picture goal that you want for your career, if this particular goal for this year fits into the bigger picture. And then time. I think time and measurable are really interlinked, because in a way, how you're going to measure whether you've achieved this is by setting a time limit on your goals. Just saying, I want to write a novel, that's really hard to quantify. But if you've got a particular word count by a certain date that you can measure and you've given it a time limit,